Hello, this is Craig Jenke. I'm here with my partner, Jay Leask, in another edition of This Week in Teams for the On the Spot Tech podcast. Guys, I am horrible with this, Jay. You go take it from here.
I will take it from here. And Craig, it's a pleasure to be your partner in life. I mean, podcasting. Good morning. Today is April 10th. It is, 8:45 your time, 9:45 my time. So we've had a good solid week ahead of us. There haven't been a lot of announcements on the Microsoft side from a feature perspective.
But there have. I don't know if you've noticed that. Sorry.
What?
I don't know if we talked about them last week, but there have been some that have been out there.
All right.
Backgrounds have been announced.
Do a quick lap.
Okay. So the ones that I've seen that we may or may not have talked about last week was the raise hand feature for meetings. A lot of people like that. Background has been announced and starting to roll out. I've seen a number of people either using the out-of-the-box ones from SharePoint. So MVPs that I've seen on Twitter have been posting pictures about it. So I assume the cat's out of the bag and it's not NDA.
Well, the good news is your NDA is only your employment. So keep going.
I saw another MVP post that pop-out chats will be coming soon. It was announced on the roadmap. So all of this stuff is on the roadmap too. So it's not NDA. I've just seen people posting them on Twitter for samples. But I think the big one that a lot of teachers like that just got rolled out was the end call feature. So now instead of just hanging up and the meeting running and the persistent chat going, there's an end call. If you hit the three dots, you get an end call thing, and that actually ends the call. And people can't rejoin it or they can't add to the chat, which I think takes some of the power away from Teams because, a lot of times I like to go back and add notes or have people ask questions after we get off the meeting to just kind of facilitate that kind of conversation. But for teachers, sometimes it gets annoying. And I know, saw one of the workarounds was just to delete the meeting, right? But now you can physically end it and people can't come back in.
I like it as an option. I do. It's funny. My wife's a teacher, and she was telling me that one of her coworkers was invited to a live chat by mistake of her students sharing answers to an exam that they were taking for her. So nothing to do with Teams or any of its market share or competitors, but I thought that was really interesting. And you brought up
my kids just use FaceTime for that.
That's fair. So,
yeah. Another thing that I saw, which was interesting, was a user voice that has been updated to be working on it and hoping to come out soon, was the ability to export the attendees of a meeting.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, we had a meeting yesterday it was a weekly status report for an engagement we have with one of our customers. And literally throughout the entire 30 minutes of this weekly status meeting, just every 2 to 3 minutes, another person would get added, and we couldn't keep up with everyone. So that would be very helpful.
Yes, I think that would be a great feature. And there's a couple other things, but I think they're more on the road. So we'll talk about them in another edition of next week.
Yeah. I think if you don't mind posting the user voice you just mentioned would be very helpful. So let's move into some of the news from the week. Zoom has been all over the place for the last few weeks. We'll share some of these links. If you haven't seen it, Zoom has a lawsuit for selling data to Facebook, including data of users that are not necessarily Facebook members. I saw as part of their response to that, they have disabled Facebook authentication for the iPhone app. I thought that was interesting. I need to look into that a little bit more to fully understand what that's about.
Yeah.
And also on the end user side, Zoom bombing. I can't believe that's a word, but there it is. Zoom bombing is happening. And what that means is if you have a public Zoom or a Zoom without a password, that is, you can get hacked, and people have been doing it. They've been jumping in, sharing everything from Nazi paraphernalia to hardcore porn in front of students and churches. So a little bit awkward. Right? The end call button would be very useful for that, I'll tell you.
Yeah, specifically. Yeah, I saw. So yesterday I sent you the link late last night. I don't know if I had a chance to look at it, but the Senate actually told its staff members not to use Zoom, which was huge. I will say in Zoom's defense, they've been trying to be active to it very quickly. I know that they've hired a new guy to, I think, used to work for Facebook,
Yes.
To help develop their security strategy. I saw on Twitter a professor from Stanford who specializes in information security has been brought on as a consultant. So they're working to shore up their shortcomings, I guess. So that's a good.
So we use Zoom for Taekwondo. I should say our Taekwondo studio uses Zoom to have live classes a couple times a day. And when I logged in yesterday evening for our 5 o'clock class, I noticed Zoom pushed out an update, and included in that update, like I said, the iPhone thing. It included hiding the meeting ID, which is something that was used to scrape that meeting. There was a tool used to scrape meeting IDs and use that Zoom bombing. So they hid that. There are some other features. So they are definitely rapidly deploying security features. But it'll be interesting to see, 3-6 months from now, if that rapid deployment saves them or if they've already, jumped the shark, so to speak. There was an administrative side too, a server side issue that you mentioned.
Yeah, I had saw an article that we'll have out there that some of their authentication is actually done through China servers, right? So
yep.
It's an article about compliance and making sure that your organization is compliant. And if you're using Zoom, it might not be, right?
Yeah.
So
it is interesting.
A lot of companies need to take a look at that. And again, I don't want to be a Zoom basher. It's a nice product that has its juices, and if it's video chatting is what you need, and your organization doesn't have a lot of other collaboration needs, like you said, Taekwondo, right? You're just doing lessons, not really a whole lot of need to be compliant, versus a legal organization or something like that, where, or a financial institution, where it matters where your data is, or if you're in if you're in European, where GDPR applies, right? So where your data needs to stay in there, then that really becomes important. So companies should take a look at that.
Yeah, it becomes a question of what compliance rules and regulations are you bound to and whether or not you're following them. Definitely not going to affect everyone, but the fact that it was there and people didn't know, I think that's the reason it became a newsworthy statement, right?
Yes.
So in response, well, maybe not directly in response, but certainly from a timeliness perspective, Microsoft released an article describing their security posture. And it's funny, over the years we always hear all the problems with Microsoft security. I've had this discussion with customers who were afraid to go to the cloud, with my focus on regulated industry. They were afraid to go to the cloud, and I looked at them and I said, "What do you think Microsoft's security R&D budget was, and do you think you come anywhere near it?" And it's a pretty straightforward question. It's the power of such a large source, such a large amount of people. They can spend more on security R&D than any individual company probably can. But they posted their security posture, talked about encryption, how all of your Teams data is encrypted at rest and in transit. Talked about all of the security options. There are meeting options, there's role options, consent for recording, privacy things. It was really interesting. So after all these years of hearing Microsoft security, Microsoft privacy, to see this come out, especially when we're looking at their biggest competitor from a video sharing perspective getting slammed so hard, it was interesting.
Yeah, I think we've done a really good job with it. A lot of people don't think or know maybe about this because they're not administrators, but we have a whole security and compliance center in Office 365 where we can do retention, data loss prevention, and then the audit logs. We can pretty much get all the information for a company to make sure and monitor people are using the tools in the right way, and that's across the Office 365 platform and not just in Teams. So we can see when teams are created, when teams are added, when people are sharing files, if they're trying to share external, and any of those kind of things we can put alerts on too if there's things that we would think might be suspicious behavior by a user. So there's a lot of good security controls in there. I was presenting it to a client yesterday on team. We were doing Teams governance, and they're like, well, everything I talked about. He's like, gotta be honest with you. He's like, this is like 10 times better than anything we are currently doing. So he's like, even if it wasn't, even if it wasn't that, right? He's like, if it can't handle every scenario, it's still doing 10 times better than what we currently are. So
yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation with a customer this week about data retention. You brought that up, and they were asking me with regard to Teams chats. They have decided to test out a 1-day retention period, which, from a use perspective, I wouldn't recommend personally. One of the power of the persistent chat in Teams is that I can search back and look at channel conversations and look at individual chats for as long as we have had Teams, if we haven't deleted it, which means all that historical knowledge is useful to me. But that aside, they were testing it out and they had a couple questions that I thought were worth sharing. The first one is if they saved items in chat items, would they disappear with that 1-day retention policy? So Microsoft has that bookmark capability, where if you right click on it, you can save the message. So yes, if you have 1-day retention, even if you click save there, it's not actually saving it. It's just a bookmark. So when that chat is deleted, the bookmark is useless, right?
Right.
They asked about files. So just for those who are curious, when you share a file in Microsoft Teams, it's stored in SharePoint or OneDrive. OneDrive if it's a private chat, SharePoint if it's a discussion thread in a team. So anything shared in the chat area immediately gets put directly into SharePoint or OneDrive, and then it follows the retention policies of those systems. So it will not get deleted. The reference to it might get deleted, but the document will still be there. And if you go to those libraries, they'll still be visible.
Good job.
Another question that I thought was really interesting, because I actually didn't have the answer to this when I had to look it up. They were asking about meeting recordings. And so we're recording this meeting in Teams. It's great. We get to go back and look at it. We get to share it. And she asked, what's the retention policy on those meeting recordings and the chat that occurs within them? There is actually no retention policy for Stream today. Stream is the internal YouTube-like video sharing platform for Office 365. When you record a meeting, it's automatically put into Stream, which is great. There's some great power there. But I was surprised that there was no retention settings for Stream yet.
Yeah, I know it's on the roadmap. I don't know. I know they're getting close. I don't for that and data loss prevention for both data loss prevention and retention for Stream. So I don't know how to say that together, but I know it's on the roadmap. I know it's working. I'm not sure on the rollout. I don't have any news on that.
Yeah, well, that's good. I sent them the link. There's a user voice. We can put it out there requesting retention for it. Please, the way user voice works, by the way, if you don't know, when you go to a user voice, if you like the option, upvote it. The more upvotes it gets, the more attention it may receive inside of Microsoft.
Yeah, which I think what it was, there was something that, the export attendees was a thing that got upvoted a lot, and they updated it to say, hey, we're working on this and we're hoping to roll it out soon. The other thing that's getting a lot of upvotes is how many people can we see, right? Right now, Microsoft only shows a grid of 4 most recent speakers. That's getting a lot of upvotes. I've seen in the roadmap that they're going to go to at least a 3x3 grid, so the Brady Bunch feature,
nice.
as I would call it. So that should be going sometime soon, and I assume with the competition with Zoom, with all that's coming out, that will get fast tracked. But I am not 100% sure on that. But so look for that or more news on that coming soon.
Very cool. So Craig, any interesting conversations happen at work this week for you?
Yeah, so what I've had, and I've seen it from more than one customer, is they want to go to Teams. They want to go to Teams now, and they want the video capability. They want to be able to have Teams, which is great, so they can share files and documents. But what they also want to be able to do is schedule meetings, and then have those meetings take place inside of Teams, right? Which is a reasonable request. Unfortunately, they've been a little bit lax on their upgrading of their infrastructure. So I have one client that's using Exchange Online, Exchange 2010, and one client that's using Exchange 2013.
Okay.
And they're not quite ready to go Office 365. They got caught a little bit behind the times, and they just can't pick up and go to Exchange Online. Or you might not think that they might be able to, and they're not fully hybrided into into Office 365, which wouldn't matter. But if you're not running at least Exchange 2016 CU3 or higher, you don't have the ability in Teams to schedule meetings.
Oh.
So that's a big loss in functionality. And my 2013 client started to roll out Teams, and then it became such a user issue that people were going, why can't I schedule meeting in Teams? That they are now fast tracking their upgrade to Exchange Online. So it was one of those, well, I think we can get by without it, until the users started going, well, no, we can't get by without it. So they're fast tracking that upgrade right now, not at a time they want to be, right, with everything else going around that the IT desk has to worry about, with all the people working from home that never did. They're all of a sudden having to do an Exchange Online migration or Exchange migration. And they're doing it relatively quickly, but they're doing it in small groups, right? Who needs Teams fastest? Who needs it more important? So it's going well, but it's not something that they wanted to do at this time. And then the 2010 client, I said, they were the same thing. Well, we're going to go, and I said, well, I'm telling you, they're going to go just to Teams without worrying about the scheduling. And I said, don't be surprised to get that pushback from your users. So.
Right. So the question there, or the key point takeaway there, is when you start to look at fast tracking Teams or whatever you have, you got to look at the whole ecosystem of Office 365 and figure out, well, if we don't have OneDrive, for example, there's no way to share documents, right? If we don't have SharePoint that turned on, then there's no document sharing. In this case, if there's no Exchange Online, there's no calendar. So that's
really... I did get that question too. Do we have to allow OneDrive, right? Can we leave OneDrive off? Which it limits the ability of Teams too.
Yep.
So there's reasons why that all plays together, and I get some people aren't ready to do certain things, but those are considerations to take in place. It also underlies the fact that I've always wondered about it when customers have, and this is prior to Microsoft working for Microsoft or anything, when they don't upgrade, like the people that are running Exchange 2010, that's 10 years, that's 10-year-old technology. I get it works for you, but there's probably reasons why. Is that even
supported? Is Microsoft releasing security patches for that?
No. So not as far as I know. I'm not an Exchange guy. I will say that. But I am seeing more and more reason to keep current on the versions that are coming out.
Yep.
Not just with Microsoft software, but with any software. If you were running, some kind of Oracle thing, not just sitting in Oracle 2010, and I'm not an Oracle guy, but making sure you're kind of keeping current. So in case something like this happens,
makes sense.
Better be prepared.
Well, Craig, I appreciate that. It's been a really good conversation. Before we end, let's talk about growth. Microsoft hasn't released numbers, so we're still at the 44 million number of users of Microsoft Teams. But there has been, so this past Thursday, it looks like they released the fact that they hit 2.7 billion minutes of meetings logged in a single day, an increase of 200% from the middle of March. So that's an amazing growth. Also, video calls grew 1,000%. I mean, working from home has really changed how people have to work very quickly.
Yeah, I saw somebody post something on that. Not so much the numbers, but it's interesting. And they were a person that has to go to work, essential worker, and they were like, it is interesting to see how many of these jobs that people were told they couldn't be work from home are now work from home, right?
Yep.
And I could see that changing the workforce permanently. So you might not be home shored, so to speak, but definitely people getting more flexibility now that they're proving that they can work from home and be productive. So that's always good. But yeah, that is a lot of minutes, and Zoom and other video conferencing are all up. So just a good job all around the industry for keeping their infrastructure up and running.
Yeah.
Because people are taxing even the internet providers, right?
Very much so.
Just we got Comcast Xfinity here. I'm just happy to, we could easily, everybody viewing Netflix and the Tiger King, watching that, streaming that, any other shows.
And the Don't Mess with Cats video that I recently picked up. Yeah, that one's fun.
Yeah.
So, well, Craig, it's a pleasure.
Always fun talking to you, Jay.
Always is, yeah. And to the 3 or 4 listeners we may have, or viewers now, thank you for checking us out.
Hi, guys.
Until next week, have a great week, and
Safe tomorrow.
Teams. Come on, end button.